So I'd like to call the June 4th meeting of the Westwood School Committee to order. Thank you for all of you who've joined online as well. So I think I first need to do a roll call of attendance. So Josepha Jowdy.
Josepha, can you unmute?
Here, sorry.
I think Carol's trying to work on. Maya Plotkin.
Here.
Charlie Donahue. Charlie muted.
How do I unmute Nancy?
No, he's.
Charlie Donahue, are you here? Yeah. Thank you. And then Anthony Mullen is here. Great. So I just want to recognize the live stream broadcast. An online stream is available through the Westwood Media Center, and it's also available online at www.westwood.k12.us/live. That's going to provide real-time public access to the activities of the school committee in accordance with the March 12th, 2020 Executive Order of Governor Baker. Also, just want to recognize to participate in the forum, residents may also use the link in the meeting posting or dial 888-475-4499. The webinar ID is 849-0417-7475. The password is 390408. I know that's a lot of data, but that's all online. If you go to the Westwood homepage, you can see all this data online. So great. So I'm going to hand it over to the School Building Committee Chair and School Committee Member, Maya Plotkin, who's going to kind of kick off today's conversation.
Great. Thanks, Tony. I just want to thank everyone for joining. Just looking at the numbers, it looks like we've got a good number of attending. So that's fabulous. We're very excited for tonight's forum and really happy to see all the engagement that we're getting from the residents. To participate in tonight's forum, as Tony mentioned, the information is on the screen. I did want to mention that there is a question and answer session at the end of the presentation. And if you want to participate in that, for those on the phone, you would press *9 to ask a question. You'll be unmuted at that time, and you'll be called on by the last 4 digits of your phone number. So that's how you know it'll be your turn to ask your question. For those who are on Zoom, at the bottom of your screen, you should see a Q&A chat tab. You just click on that, type in your question, and the moderator will read your question in the order in which it's received. Just be aware if your question is a duplicate and it's already been answered, your question may not be read. So those are the 2 ways to participate in the Q&A tonight. As we mentioned, that'll be at the end of the presentation. And with that, I think we can move forward and ask Emily to switch the slide. While she's doing that, I should introduce the panelists. I'm Maya Plotkin. I am chair of the School Building Committee. I'm also on the school committee. We have, and I'm just going down the list here, we've got Emily Parks, Superintendent of Schools, Charlie Donahue on the school committee as well. Chin Lin is with Compass. They are our owner's project manager. Don Walter and Glenn Gallrad are with Doran Whittier, our architects. Josepha Jowdy is with school committee. Rob Fitzgerald is also with Doran Whittier, and Tony Mullen, who introduced himself earlier. So those are our panelists. So we're starting off by, oh, did I miss someone?
You did. It's Carol, but I'm on by phone.
Oh, and Carol is on. Great. So Carol Lewis, another school committee member, is on as well. Thanks, Carol. Where are we in the process? Just to kind of level set, remind everyone of where we are. So back in 2015 and 2016, the school committee commissioned this master capital needs study. And as you recall, what that study showed was that Deerfield, Hanlon, and Sheehan are all schools in need of modernization, old systems, old configurations. And so that's the result from that capital needs study. So in 2017, the school district submitted a statement of interest to the Massachusetts School Building Authority, the MSBA, to enter their grant program where they would reimburse a portion of any school building project. and we were accepted into that program in December. I just want to remind everyone that we could only submit for one school. So we submitted for Hanlon School because looking at the capital needs study, that seemed to be the school in the most need. So again, about 80 schools were applied, and we were one of 18 who were accepted into the process. So we were very happy about that. In 2018, we started with holding community meetings. This was really to inform the public about, what did the needs study show? What's sort of wrong with these schools? Why do they need to be modernized? Why do they need to be updated? In that same year in the spring at town meeting, the town decided to agree to fund the feasibility study of the MSBA process. At that time, we were still in the eligibility phase. So in order to move to the next phase, we needed the town to fund that. So they did. And that phase began in February 2019. And also in 2018, the school building committee was formed. And just to remind everybody, this is the committee that's really driving this school project. It consists of all 5 school committee members. It consists of a number of district administrators. There's a representative from select board on it, a representative from the permanent building committee on it, and other members, including parents and other members of the community as well. So that brings us to now, 2019 and 2020. During this time, we have hired Compass, our project manager, and Doran Whittier, our design team. The MSBA approved a short list of options, which we presented to the community in March. And where we are right now is the evaluation subcommittee of the school building committee has recommended a final design option to the school building committee for approval. That's what we're going over today. And the school building committee is going to vote on that option on June 19th. If it passes, it will be submitted to the MSBA in what's called the PSR report. It's the preferred schematic report in July, and the MSBA will vote on that in the summer. Assuming all of that goes through as we plan, we then move into the next phase, which is called schematic design. And that's when we take this option and we really, really sort of dive into it. At this point, it's about 15% designed. So schematic design will get us most of the way to the end. And at the end of schematic design, which will be spring of 2021, we will know exactly what the project will be. We will know how much the total cost of the project, and we will bring that to town meeting. We will also know the amount that the MSBA is going to fund for the project, and all of that information will be presented for a vote to the town at town meeting next spring. So that's where we are. And we're now going to talk about what have we done. So how have we been educating the community about this project? So we started, as I mentioned, in 2018, letting everybody know what the district needed in terms of these schools and the modernization. And this is really just a list of reminding everybody the ways we've been outreaching. In January 2018, we sent a letter to all the Westwood residents about the project. We went on Inside Westwood to talk about the project. In March and April, if you might recall, we held multiple community forums where we discussed the current conditions of these 3 schools. We had held school tours where you could walk through the schools and see the issues for yourself. There were articles in the newsletter. And also, as I mentioned, there was the town meeting where we discussed the project and we got the vote for the feasibility study. There was a letter to the editor in the newspapers. And in December 2018, we sent a written update to all of the residents as we move to this current phase that we're in. So that leads us to 2019 and 2020. And this is really where we started getting the community input in terms of visioning for this project. So from this past school year, there have been 21 school building committees. These have all been public meetings. They've all been recorded. They've all been open to the public. We've also, in October, we held multiple community forums to review the process, to meet the design team, to discuss project priorities. In January, we held multiple forums for education planning and visioning sessions with educators, with community members. In March, we had a community forum to obtain input on that short list, the 7 options. design options. In April, we held a community forum on redistricting options. And in June now, we're holding this forum to talk about the recommended final design option. And really the point of this slide is just to show how important community engagement was to us, how hard we tried to make sure we heard the community and what they wanted. And I will say that we have all been incredibly amazed and pleased with the response from the community. The architects have mentioned to us that they are so impressed with the engagement of Westwood residents on this project. We're so happy because, again, this really is a community project in our minds. And so the more we get from the community, the more feedback, the more input, the more design, the more it will feed the design, and the more of a community-wide project it'll be. So that's what we've been doing for community input and visioning. So just a quick reminder of the 7 shortlist options, and I'm going to run through these pretty quickly. The one that's not on here is option 1, which is just bringing Hanlon as it currently exists up to code. That option isn't on here because there's no changes to the site. These 6 options are, so as you'll see, there's one option, there's another option that is only deals with Hanlon. That's option number 6. 315 students, and it's a brand new Hanlon school on the Hanlon site. There's 2 options that deal with a consolidation of Hanlon and Deerfield. Those are options 7 and 10. Those are both new schools on the Hanlon site. There's 3 options that deal with the consolidation of Hanlon and Sheehan. One of those options, option 4, is to add onto the existing Hanlon and renovate. And then option 11 is a brand new school on the Hanlon site. And option 15 is a brand new school on the Sheehan site. So these were the 7 options, if you include option 1, that were on the short list and that we are going to sort of run through the evaluation process with you tonight. So that brings us to the evaluation criteria. And I am going to turn this over to Emily. There are 5 categories. She's going to talk about the first few, and then I'll pick up the last couple of them.
Great, thanks, Maya. So I just want to orient everyone to this evaluation matrix that we've been using. If you've been following along in the process, you probably noticed that it's a significantly more detailed matrix than we were using to get to the short list. This is where we were really trying to dig in and take a hard look at each of the options. So as Maya said, there are 5 categories: education, site, town impact, security, sustainability, and construction impact, and cost. And then each of these categories you'll see have subcategories. So in total, we have 14 criteria, 14 rows on the matrix. We have guiding questions associated with each row to help us understand what it was we were evaluating. For each criterion, each option receives a score of 1 to 5, with 5 being the best rating. And then you'll also see here that each criterion has a weight multiplier. We really tried to capture in the weight multipliers what we had heard from the community about what is most important to Westwood in this project. So for example, you'll see here that the educational guidelines and also this net cost to town related to all 3 of the schools' needs that we're speaking about. Those were the most heavily weighted at 15 points in the matrix. So I'm going to start by talking about the education category. It has 4 subcategories. The first subcategory is educational guidelines, and our guiding questions were: how well does this option support and align with the desired educational experiences? How well does the building organization support community and collegiality among students and staff? And how well does the alternative retain the small school feel? And I just want to mention for this first question about how well it aligns with the desired educational experiences, we went through a lengthy process of visioning and getting input from educators and from the community. And out of that came something called the educational plan, which we presented at a community forum in January. That plan really articulates our guiding principles of what we're trying to do educationally with this design. So you'll see here that all of the new options received high scores with either a 4 or a 5. The highest score was the tree design, what we refer to as the tree design. And you'll see that we have a version of that design that's at the 560 design enrollment and also at the 685 design enrollment. So basically the new options, because they were designed specifically to meet our educational criteria, most closely aligned with them. And then as we sort of looked closely at the new design options, we ended up making some distinctions and really thinking that the tree option, we just liked it better. It has, I think, a great sense of sort of grade level neighborhoods, nice identities for the grade level teams, but also a connection between the grade level neighborhoods. We liked the way the media center was expressed. It's sort of the heart of the Southern classroom wings, that a portion of the media center square footage is allocated for early readers, for kindergartners and first graders. We preferred the way the public and private space was divided, and we thought the location of the gym with respect to the fields was also optimal. So for that reason, the tree design kind of edged out the other new designs and received 5s. All of the new designs really do work in terms of our educational outcomes. They include extended learning spaces, small group breakout space, the proper size classrooms for modern educational programs, and frankly, they're all very exciting. The addition and renovation for 685, this is option 4, does have some benefits. In particular, in the new addition in the building, where the space could be designed to meet our specifications. But in the renovated section, it would still leave us with undersized classrooms and without extended learning spaces or breakout spaces. And so for that reason, it received a 3. And then the renovation only option received a 1. It would bring things up to code, but clearly doesn't allow us to address our educational needs. The next subcategory in education is growth and future. The question is, how well does the building organization support the potential for future growth, building expansion, and or the changes in student needs and educational delivery models over the life of the building for 70+ years? So here we're really trying to look towards the future and think about our investment. So you'll see here in this category that the options that are on the Hanlon site got the highest scores with 5s. The Hanlon site clearly affords more flexibility just because of the size of the site. And so it allows more potential for future growth. In addition, though, the new designs provide more flexibility inside the building in terms of the interior space and how we think it could respond to changes in the educational programming. So you'll see that those new options also receive some good scores. However, the new option at Sheehan received a 3 because the features of the site, the Sheehan site, one of the things that we've learned through this feasibility study is that particularly to put a building of 685 students on the Sheehan site and to try to address some of our needs with fields is just it's a tight site. So that we gave a 3. And the reno only, it's on the Hanlon site, so it does have some possibility for future growth, but clearly it doesn't have the same advantages in terms of flexibly meeting changes in education over time. Next category is outdoor learning and connection to nature. Our question here is, how well does the building support outdoor learning opportunities and a strong connection to nature? And I will say that I felt like this was a theme that really came out very loudly during the visioning that we did with the community, a desire to have this connection to nature and outdoor learning options. So you'll see all of the new options at Hanlon scored 5. our designers have really been talking with us about a concept, sort of a theme that they've brought to their design, and it's the idea of a school in the woods. So there's lots of opportunities to include outdoor learning spaces on the Hanlon site, and also to provide for some connections with the walking path in the woods behind the school. So those scored very highly. The new option at the Sheehan site scored a 4. The design also includes some outdoor learning spaces, though it doesn't have the same kind of access to features like trails. The add reno option and the base repair option have more limited opportunities for outdoor learning additions, although they are clearly still on the Hanlon site with that connection to the woods. And finally, in education, we have impact to other schools. Our guiding questions here was, how does the design enrollment impact the size of the remaining schools? How well does the project address equitable class size? And how well does the project address educational delivery across the district? So over the course of this process, we've had quite a bit of discussion about the concept of consolidation. We have talked about it at school committee meetings, and also talked about it quite a bit at the Redistricting Community Forum back in April. And during those discussions in particular, we've talked about some of the challenges that we have as a district that has very small schools. And there are some challenges in terms of operational efficiencies and staffing efficiencies, and also notably some challenges in creating class sizes that are both favorable and equitable in those very small schools. So you'll see here that the lowest scores in this category went to the Hanlon only options, the reno and the new school for 315. And that's because those projects positively impact the fewest number of students in the district. The highest scores went to the options with a design enrollment of 560. That would be a consolidation of Hanlon and Deerfield. That consolidation would take the 2 smallest schools in the district, which, as I said, currently pose some real challenges given their size. And it would create 1 larger school, thereby solving those challenges. And what's more, in a Hanlon-Deerfield consolidation, the remaining school, Sheehan, is a reasonably sized school. So, historically, there have often been about 3 sections per grade at Sheehan. It's a good sized school. The 685 consolidation option, that would be a consolidation of Hanlon and Sheehan, does eliminate the very small school challenges that are associated with Hanlon, but it leaves Deerfield, the smallest school in the district. Right now, Deerfield has fewer than 200 students. Our projection next year is that we will have 4 singleton classes at Deerfield. And unfortunately, some of those singleton classes are rather large. They're sort of too big to split, but they're larger than we would like a class to be. And so while the 685 consolidation has some benefits for Hanlon, it still leaves that significant challenge associated with Deerfield. And in addition, the 685 consolidation creates sort of a greater disparity in size. So you would have a school of 685 on one hand and a school of maybe, say, 190 on the other hand. And so for those reasons, the consolidation options for the 685 design enrollment scored 3s. So here we just have a snapshot of the education category overall, and you can see the category subtotals here at the bottom. So the next category is site. There are 2 subcategories here. The first subcategory is circulation and parking. The issues we are taking a look at here are proximity of parking to the main entrance, a site that supports the appropriate number of parking spaces, safe, clear, and easily understood circulation routes, a separation of bus, car, and pedestrian loops, adequate queuing space for buses, and safe access into and out of the site. So here you'll see that the new options at Hanlon scored the highest. So that's options 6, 7, 10, and 11. Those options were designed with the criteria that we just reviewed in mind, and the size and the location of the site supported the designer's ability to meet that design criteria. So actually, I can show you again here. So you'll see in these options, we're able to create separate bus loops and parent loops. We have ample parking. You get a sense of the layout here. The ad reno for 685 at Hanlon scored a 3. This is this one, option 4. Since it's a renovation, there isn't the same opportunity to situate the building as strategically on the site. So this option is able to address the current parking challenges here, and that's a big plus. But you'll see that the bus queue is right up against the road, which we thought was problematic. And so we scored that a 3. And then the new option at Sheehan here, number 15, it does have ample parking. There are separate car and bus areas, but we have some concerns that the bus queue isn't long enough to fit the number of buses that would be required. And that's partly related to some challenges with the site on Pond Street and sort of a curve in the road. So it's harder to extend that further. And again, the bus queue is right up against the road. So that did not score as highly. And just going back to the scores here, that scored a 2. And the reno only scored a 1, basically because it leaves all of the current challenges and safety concerns. So we have concerns about cars backing onto Gay Street. We don't have an ability to separate out loops for buses and cars, and the circle at Hanlon currently is very small. The other subcategory in site is access to fields and site fit. Here we're looking at access to fields, to playgrounds, and to outdoor learning spaces. And we're also looking at the scale of the building relative to the site and asking, does the building size, is it proportionate to the site that it sits on? So here you'll see that all of the options at the Hanlon site scored higher than the option at the Sheehan site. The new options, again, 6, 7, 10, and 11 at Hanlon, scored the highest. In the designs, the designers were able to locate the playing fields closer to the road with adjacent parking. I'll flip back to the sites again so you can see this. We also like the way that the playgrounds and the outdoor learning spaces are adjacent to the cafeteria and to the classroom wings. And we didn't have any concerns about the size of the building with respect to the size of the site. In the addition and renovation option, we weren't able to situate the fields down by the road. They have to go here out back behind the building, and we didn't think that that was as optimal. And then the new option at the Sheehan site, as we've mentioned, the Sheehan site just turned out to be considerably more challenging than the Hanlon site, just because of how much space is available. And so we do have some concerns about the size of the building and it not being proportionate to the site. We also did note that there's a long distance between the parking and the baseball field. And so that option scored a 3. So again, here is the summary overall of the site category with the category subtotal. Next category is town impact. We have 3 subcategories: redistricting, traffic, and community use. So redistricting, our questions were, to what degree does the project retain neighborhood communities? What are the redistricting impacts on busing, considering travel time and number of students impacted? And how well does the project meet building utilization goals? So we hired a redistricting consultant to conduct an analysis and to provide us with recommendations of how to redistrict for each of the consolidation options. And that consultant presented at a school committee meeting in April. And then we had an entire community forum dedicated to the topic of redistricting at the end of April. So I obviously don't want to repeat that entire discussion tonight, but the videos of those meetings are available online if anyone wants to get into more detail. But I will just quickly share sort of a high level summary of what we found out. So these maps demonstrate what the plan would be if the consolidation was of Hanlon and Deerfield for design enrollment of 560 students on the Hanlon site. And I think what you'll see here is that it turns out that this redistricting process would be a relatively straightforward proposition. So effectively, you would just erase this line between the current Deerfield and Hanlon district and create one consolidated district. And so this redistricting option impacts the least number of students. It would impact about 175 students who currently go to Deerfield and then would attend school down on the Hanlon site. And so there would be some change in the sense that kids would have to travel a little bit further down the road to Hanlon. But generally speaking, there wouldn't be that much disruption in this redistricting option. This is the redistricting recommendation for a consolidation of Hanlon and Sheehan for design enrollment of 685 students at the Hanlon site. So by comparison, what's clear from the consultant's analysis is that a Hanlon-Sheehan consolidation is just more complicated for redistricting. So in this scenario, you have a school for 685 on the Hanlon site, and you can see that there no longer is a Sheehan district. We would need in this scenario to move a large number of students across town to get to the Hanlon site. And in fact, there would be students living in the westernmost part of the district who would actually pass by Deerfield in order to get to school at the Hanlon site. So this redistricting option impacts about 465 students. It's basically a wholesale redistricting with changes to all of the districts except for Downey. So we do think this option would pose significant disruption for the community and for neighborhoods, and obviously has some much greater transportation challenges associated with it. And then the consultant took a look at consolidating for a building of 685 on the Sheehan site. And it turns out that this is even more complicated than the prior scenario. This consolidation option would impact the greatest number of students. About 528 students would be redistricted. Just because of the geographic layout of the town and where the population density is, you can see that in the scenario, we end up with this blue Sheehan district that's spread over a very large area. It's kind of a strange shape. And we end up having to transport many students across town. And in this scenario, you end up with a situation where you have sort of Downey over here on one side of town and then the other schools on the other side of town. So that certainly does not seem optimal. We actually, when we first got this, we asked the consultant to go back and look at it again and see if there is any other way to create a better situation, because this one just seems so disruptive to us. And they did go back and give us a second option, but frankly, it just didn't get much better. So the consultant's recommendation clearly was the Deerfield Hanlon consolidation for 560 for all the reasons that you can see here on the screen. And so in terms of the scoring, you can see that the design enrollments of 560, the Hanlon Deerfield consolidation scored a 5, and then the 685s scored 2s. The 685 at the Sheehan scored the worst with a 1. And then you can see that the two Hanlon only options here both scored 4s. And that's because obviously if you're only dealing with Hanlon, then there would not be any impact. There wouldn't be any redistricting. But we did score them a 4 rather than a 5 because one of our questions has to do with how well we're doing meeting building utilization goals, and leaving the 5 elementary schools does not turn out to be the most efficient way to go in terms of effectively utilizing our space across the district. The next subcategory is traffic. The questions are, what is the impact on the neighborhood and town? What about walkability? What is the impact on, or the overall net increase in cars versus walkers? So we have had an initial traffic study done, and then clearly this category is very much related to the prior discussion about redistricting. So here, the new Hanlon only option for 315 scored the highest. Obviously, they're really, because the questions are phrased here about what the impact is on traffic, there wouldn't be an impact. We would leave the districts as they are, and the traffic patterns would remain the same. However, we did think that, so we did think that in the Reno only option, we scored it a 2, because we would not have the opportunity in that scenario to fix some of the traffic challenges related to cars backing onto K Street. The new 560 options received 4s. So there would be some impact to traffic here. However, we do currently have a significant percentage of students who already travel on buses to get to Deerfield. And so those kids on buses would have to continue down to Hanlon. We also have some current Deerfield walkers who would also now need to drive to school or to be transported on a bus. So there would be some impact to traffic here, but we don't think that it's terribly significant. And obviously the 685 options did not score well because of the reasons that we just discussed about the need to transport so many students. So I'm actually turning it back over to Maya.
Thank you. So I'm talking about the third subcategory of town impact, which is community use. And here we looked at how the benefits, what benefits each option provided to the community, such as sports fields, community space, gym space. And as you'll see from this, all of the options 6, 7, 10, and 11, which are all new builds on the Hanlon site, got 5s. Currently at Hanlon, we have 1 Little League field. The new site, and Emily, if you could scroll forward 1. So the new site in each one of these options in 6, 7, 10, and 11 will all have 1 Little League field, 1 11v11 soccer field. That's in the baseline cost. There's also the potential for an additional 7v7 field. There's room for that. The new school, all of these new schools will have a regulation size basketball court in the gym. And again, with the potential for 2 cross courts that would be middle school size, regulation size. Each of these schools would have a performance space, not an auditorium, but the cafeteria would be designed for performance with, keeping performance in mind as well. And as we know, I think the high school in particular in the spring gets pretty jammed up with performances. So this would be a great option to host other performances to alleviate some of that pressure. And finally, in all of these options, there's a very easy separation of the academic space from these public areas like the cafeteria, the gym, so that it'd be easy to host community events here. We could do voting, town meeting, even just speakers that come to town. So all of these options scored 5s in the community use. Option 4, the Add Reno on the Hanlon site, got a 4 because even though it would have the new fields and the new gym and the performance space, it was a little bit tighter. So for example, the parking lot is pretty far from the fields. So it's not quite as convenient. So that just scored a little bit less. Option 15, which is the new building on the Sheehan site, got a 2. as you can see from the plan, the site is very tight. And currently at Sheehan, we have 2 Little League baseball fields and 1 large multi-use soccer field, which gets a lot of use. If we built this school on the site, we would only have room for 1 Little League field and 1 7v7 soccer field. So we would have to relocate all of the remaining fields elsewhere in the town. We saw that as a significant disadvantage because it's clearly an added cost to the town, and also it would be tough to find space in the town to relocate those fields. Also, the Little League field is very far from the parking lot. You'd have to walk the length of the building to get there. And then finally, on option 15, the 7v7 soccer field and the Little League field are very tight on the site. You can see that they're pretty much at the border of the site. So even though this new building would have the new gym, it would have the performance space, and you still could separate the public and private, the disadvantages were pretty significant. So we did wind up giving it a 2. And then finally, option 1, which you can see here, I think that's got a 1 because, which is the existing Hanlon renovation, because we're not getting anything new for the town. So you can see in the community use column, and this is the summary of all of the town impact, you can see that options, the new options at Hanlon scored particularly high, and the options at Sheehan here, and for the 685 population scored lower just because of the disadvantages of the site and also the larger population. So moving on to security. This was pretty straightforward. Options 6, 7, 10, 11, and 15, these are all the new builds, got 5s because they'll be designed purposefully to incorporate the current best practices for security. Option 4, which is the addition renovation at Hanlon, got a 4 because while we can implement most security measures, there may be some limitations due to the nature of the fact that this is a renovation. And option 1 at the existing Hanlon got a 2 because there would be no new security features installed in the new building. I'm sorry, in the renovated building. Sustainability, very similar to security. All the new options got a 5 because they'll be designed purposefully, again, to incorporate the sustainability options that the school building committee decides should go in this building, and they'll be in line with town goals as well. Option 4 got a 4. Option 4 got a 4. For similar reasons as before, we can implement some sustainability options, but because it's an ad reno, we might be limited in some respects. And finally, option 1, the existing Hanlon got a 1. Currently, there are no sustainable initiatives in the building, unfortunately, and a renovation would only bring it up to code. It would not add new sustainability options. So moving on to logistics and construction impacts. So here we looked at things like, what is the impact to students and parents and the faculty during the construction? How difficult is the phasing? Do we need to do this in multiple phases? Do we need to move kids around? What are the logistics of the site in terms of getting construction vehicles in and out? And finally, what's the impact to neighbors and the neighborhood during construction? So here, well, first, we didn't give anybody a 5 in this category because each option would require some amount of impact, of adverse impact. So the highest score we gave was a 4, and that was to options 6, 7, 10, and 11. These are all the new builds on the Hanlon site. And really, this is a function of the size of the site. You know, again, 40 acres gives you a lot of room to play with. So because this is a new build and because we're building further back on the site, the students can stay in the existing building without interruption or moving from place to place while the new school is being built. So no phasing is necessary. The students will still have access to the fields during most of construction. And because the site is large, there's room for construction vehicle access to get in and out, and also to stage materials, meaning, you know, bringing in the materials that you're going to need to build the school and putting them somewhere. There's a lot of room to do that with, and that should result in minimal disruption to the students and the faculty in the school. Option 4, which is the addition renovation at Hanlon, on the Hanlon site, got a 2. Even though we have that large site, Because we're adding and renovating an existing school, we'll have to conduct it in phases, which means that students will be in one portion of the school while another portion is being renovated. And then once that renovation is done, we'd move the students into that new portion and start renovating the old portion. So it's a lot of phasing. It's a lot of moving kids around. The students will be in classrooms with walls that are adjacent to the construction, which clearly is not ideal. And finally, because we're not clearing as much of the site, we're not going as far back into the site, construction vehicle access and staging of the materials is going to be more limited and therefore more disruptive. Option 15, which is the new building on Sheehan, also got a 2. Again, function of the site. It's a much smaller site than Hanlon. And while we can construct a new school so the students can remain in the existing school, but because the site is so tight, construction vehicle access and the material staging will definitely be disruptive to the students and faculty in the school. And on top of that, the new school is going to have to be built on the existing fields. So the town will lose use of all of those fields during construction, which could be up to about 2 years. So for those reasons, we gave it a 2. And finally, option 1, the existing Hanlon renovation, that's the least desirable because we basically have to move all of the students out into temporary classrooms while we renovate the school. So this is sort of showing you the total of security, sustainability, and construction impact. You can see the new schools at Hanlon scored the highest. The new school at Sheehan for 685 scored next, and then the ad reno and the reno only at the Hanlon site sort of fell to the bottom of the pack there. So this is our last category, cost. And there's 3 subcategories. So the first one we're going to talk about is overall cost. So this was a very straightforward analysis. Simply put, we looked at the total cost of each project, and the least expensive project got the highest score and the most expensive project got the lowest score. What I need to emphasize here is that these costs are for relative purposes only at this point. So we can score the options against each other. As I mentioned earlier, we've only done about 15% of the design. So we still have 85% to go. So these costs are by no means final, and they will change. We will be, if we add sustainability upgrades, the cost will go up. If we value engineer, the cost will go down. So these really are for comparative purposes and should not be held as what we expect the cost of the project to be. As I said at the beginning of the presentation, when we get to town meeting, we will know what the real project cost is and how much the MSBA is reimbursing. So I just wanted to emphasize that point. But it's very clear here. The most expensive options were 4, 11, and 15. So those got 2s. It makes sense. Those are the biggest schools. Option 7 and 10, which is the new builds for the Hanlon Deerfield population, got the same score of 3. They almost came in exactly the same from the cost estimators. Option 6, with the ad reno for Hanlon only, got a 4. And the least expensive option was clearly just renovating Hanlon to code. So this moves us to net cost to town for all 3 schools. As Emily mentioned earlier, this particular subcategory was weighted the most along with educational guidelines. This to us was a very important consideration. And breaking it down, there's sort of 2 main components of this subcategory. The first is what is the net capital cost to the town? And the second is what's the dollar amount that the MSBA will reimburse us for the project? And that's how we scored. So looking at those a little bit further, the net capital cost to the town, the key component here is really cost avoidance. So which plan best avoids future anticipated capital costs? We know we've got 3 old schools. We know that maintaining them is expensive, particularly going forward. So we wanted to really sort of dive into that concept of the capital cost and trying to avoid these forward-looking capital costs. So in that sense, the consolidation of Hanlon and Sheehan would create the most immediate solution for this capital needs. by taking the 2 bigger schools out of operation. And you're left with 1 school with relatively low, hopefully, capital costs. So therefore, the Hanlon-Sheehan projects received the highest scores, and the Hanlon-only option, which would only take 1 old school offline, received the lowest score. In terms of the MSBA participation, the key component here is the amount of dollars, as I mentioned, that the town would get from the MSBA for the project. Because the MSBA reimbursement is a percentage of the project cost, the bigger the project, the bigger the reimbursement. So again, the Hanlon-Sheehan projects, which cost the most, got the highest scores, and the Hanlon-only options, which cost the least, got the lowest scores because, again, you're getting the least amount of money from the MSBA. But there's 2 points that I want to mention here. So first, even though the Hanlon-Sheehan projects received the highest scores, the distinction between the Hanlon-Sheehan projects, so we're talking 4, 11, and 15, and the Hanlon-Deerfield projects, which is 7 and 10, you'll notice it's only 1 point difference. So it wasn't that significant, mainly because even though you're getting more money from the MSBA, the overall project cost is higher. So the town actually ends up spending more on these bigger projects. So that's why we thought the differential between the 2 options was not that significant. You'll also notice that this is the only category where we deducted half points. This is because we wanted this category to capture the fact that in the event of the consolidation, the town would have to take a vacated building back, and they renovate it or operate it or somehow use the building. And this is an added cost to the town. And we felt it was important to reflect this financial implication in these scores. So we ended up deducting half a point from the score of each of the consolidation options, so that this score would be sure to reflect that, that sort of financial issue. So we did think a lot about this category. We discussed the various components in this category for a long time. And I really feel that this resulting scores reflect these complex discussions. So hopefully I made that clear. So the last subcategory of the last category, busing and operational costs. These are just overall transportation costs and the ongoing operating costs and the implications to the district. So here, options 7 and 10, which are new builds on the Hanlon site with 560 students, those both got 5s. There's a smaller impact on busing costs here because, as Emily mentioned, you're basically just adding the Deerfield population, which 80% of which is already on buses, and just having them drive further down Gay Street. You're also taking 2 schools offline, and you're operating 1 new school with higher efficiencies. And there is some effect on salaries, particularly with specialists who tend to travel between schools. So you might get some efficiencies with scheduling, but that's not quite as significant a savings as the other 2. So options 4 and 11, the ad reno on the Hanlon site and the new build on the Hanlon site, got 4s. These are more impact because these are Sheehan consolidations. So as Emily mentioned in the redistricting conversation, you're moving a lot more kids around town. But here they're going to Sheehan, which is a more central, they're going to Hanlon, which is a more central school than Sheehan. So the busing costs are going to be a little bit lower than if they were going to the Sheehan site. And again, you're taking 2 old schools offline and operating 1 new school. And you'd have the same minimal effect on salaries. Final option 15, which is the new building on the Sheehan site, that received a 3. Busing costs increase here, as I mentioned, because the Sheehan site is not as centrally located, and the redistricting map is more complicated if you consolidate Hanlon and Sheehan at the Sheehan. Option 6, the new building on the Hanlon site for only Hanlon, got a 3. So even though there would be no increase to the busing costs because you're not adding on additional routes, you'd still have, if you only solved for Hanlon, you would still have 2 old buildings online. You'd only be operating 1 new school. And option 1, the existing Hanlon renovation, got a 1 because you still have 3 fairly old buildings online. So cost came out sort of a little split. You can see that the options 7 and 10 and 15 fell a little bit behind options 4 and 11. These were the Hanlon-Sheehan consolidations at the Hanlon, but pretty close to each other. And really the big point here is that option 1 and option 6, which are the Hanlon only sites, were well behind the consolidation sites, because the net cost to the town and the busing and operation costs were just lower there. So this is what the final matrix looked like with the final numbers, and I am going to turn it back over to Emily to sort of round us up.
Great, thanks. So you can see the final outcome here. And in fact, I think, move to the next slide. So here we've taken the total scores. We have the score for each subcategory and then the total scores. And we've ordered them here from highest to lowest points. So you can see that the highest points came out with option 7, which is the new building for the Hanlon Deerfield consolidation of 560 on the Hanlon site. And I would point out that sort of a close second here at 443 is also, well, the reason they're so similar is that they are both Hanlon Deerfield consolidations for 560 students on the Hanlon site. The only distinction between option 7 and option 10 is literally the design of the building. And so you can see that these two options received the same scores in every category except education, where the educators had a preference for the tree design over the E. So I really think that the probably the more interesting comparison is between option 7, which is the 560 consolidation at Hanlon, and option 11, which is the 685 consolidation of Hanlon-Sheehan at the Hanlon site. And you can see that there is, some difference here in the overall score. And it's interesting to go back and see sort of where those distinctions happen. And so you can see that that the differences really come out. There's some small difference here in terms of cost, with the 685 getting slightly more points than 560. But the real differences sort of come through when you start looking at the educational differences and when you start looking at the differences under the town impact. That's where we started to see the distinctions. And then the other options follow from there. And so the recommended option from the evaluation subcommittee to the school building committee is option 7, new construction, Hanlon Deerfield consolidation for 560 students at the Hanlon site. The informal design name of this particular plan is called the tree. So if we sort of take as an assumption for a moment that that recommended option does in fact get approved at the school building committee meeting on June 19th, and of course there is opportunity for further discussion prior to that vote, it does leave this question of what happens to Sheehan. And we wanted to put this up on the screen because as we've been going through this community process, this is a question that we've heard a lot from residents. We have 3 buildings that are in need, and this project maximally would take care of 2 out of those 3. And what would happen to the remaining school? And we want to assure people that we're very aware of this issue, and we've been thinking about it quite a bit. And talking about it publicly at school committee meetings and at community forums. So in February of 2020, the school committee allocated some funds, a relatively small amount of money, $30,000, to commission a design study of the remaining school. So that money has already been earmarked. And so our plan at that time, and it is still the plan, is that in June 2020, as soon as the school building committee approves a final project option and we know what the remaining school is, and again, if this recommendation goes forward, it would be Sheehan, then this this design study would commence immediately. So we're ready to begin that process. And the idea would be that we would have the information, the results of this design study, to then determine what is the best course for the future. And the school committee would recommend either an addition or renovation to Sheehan or construction of a new Sheehan building on the Sheehan site. And so at this point, you know, I would say that we've been having these discussions for some time, and we did have some thoughts about what the timeline for this project would be. However, this plan was built on a number of assumptions, and with the pandemic and the resulting change in the economic landscape, then a lot of those assumptions, you know, may be impacted, and things have changed. And I feel like it's important to say out loud that we recognize that some things have changed since we were having conversations back in the beginning of February. And so we will move forward with this initial design study, and we will determine what the plan would be. And then the timeline for moving forward will be further developed as the economic environment becomes clear and as we better understand community response to the design study. So we think that at this point, what we need to do is make sure that we're focusing on the next step. And the next step is to move forward with the MSBA project, and to make sure that that process hopefully is successful. The question about what would the plan be for Sheehan would be very important, though. And part of the reason that we would need to embark on that high-level design study right now is because it's related to this question. So what then happens to Deerfield in a Hanlon-Deerfield consolidation? So if the school committee recommends new construction for the Sheehan, then it's likely that the district would fairly immediately return control of Deerfield back to the town. So once the project was complete and we moved the kids out of Deerfield, it would be time to return Deerfield to the control of the town. However, if the school committee recommended an addition or renovation to Sheehan, then the district would likely retain Deerfield to serve as temporary classroom or swing space while Sheehan is being renovated, potentially. When the swing space is no longer needed, then control of Deerfield would revert to the town. And so the select board will be asked to create a committee to examine the potential town uses for the vacated school if and when control of it reverts to the town. And this is an important process because it's a specific question that the MSBA asks communities to answer. And the answer can be that the select board is creating a committee to examine the potential uses. But basically the MSBA just wants to ensure that there is no plan in the community to say sell the property or turn it over to a developer and to somehow profit from this process when the MSBA is providing grant funds to the town. So our next steps at this point, we have a school committee meeting on June 11th, and the school committee will be taking some important votes about design enrollment and redistricting. On June 12th, the school building committee will be meeting to discuss sustainability decisions. And then on June 19th, the school building committee will be meeting to once again discuss the results of the evaluation matrix and to take a vote on which option to move forward to the next phase, so the final option. In July, the school building committee submits what's called the PSR, so it's our preferred option to the MSBA. And in the summer, the MSBA hopefully then votes to move us forward into the next phase. And then in the summer, the school building project would enter the schematic design phase, and we would start the next part of the process. Just want to remind people there are lots of ways to stay informed. So we enjoy the cooperation of Westwood Media Center, and we record our meetings. And Maya also typically records through Westwood Media Center updates after each meeting to sort of summarize what happened. We have a website that's dedicated to the school building project. All of the information throughout this entire process is still up there, so it's possible to go back and find past meetings and documents and presentations. You can subscribe to our email list on the website. You can submit questions right there. And as I said, review the materials. Okay, so with that, I think that we are ready to start the question and comment period. I'm wondering if I can stop sharing my screen for a moment.
Yeah.
And I think Melinda is going to be doing the questions. Is that correct?
Yep, I'm ready when you
Great.
are.
All right.
Okay,
I think we're ready.
great. Okay, so the first question is, considering COVID, is there a possibility we may vote yes as a town, but then state reimbursement ends up being lower than anticipated, leaving us residents with a higher amount we're responsible for?
So I can take this one. So it's a very good question. So the way the MSBA works is they are funded by a portion of a percentage of the sales tax. So clearly COVID has impacted their funding. However, the way they work is they allocate funds for accepted projects as they have the funds. So we've been told by the MSBA that projects for fiscal years 20 and fiscal year 21, which have been approved, are in the pipeline, and of which we're a fiscal 21 project. That money has already been allocated. It's been received and allocated. So we don't anticipate any significant change to the percentages that we have been working with the MSBA. Having said that, prior to the town meeting vote, which is next spring, the MSBA board itself will vote on our reimbursement amount. So when we go to town meeting and we ask you to vote yes or no, the number that we tell you the MSBA is giving us has already been committed by the MSBA by their board vote. So we will have that number in hand at town meeting. So I hope that answers the question. In short, we don't anticipate, from what we've been told, we don't anticipate COVID to affect us. I think future projects it may affect future projects that either are just coming into the pipeline now, or even more going forward. But for where we are in the process, from what we understand, we don't think COVID will affect our reimbursement significantly.
For the record, that was James Kane who asked that question, and a similar question was asked by Jennifer Flanders, so I'm not going to repeat that question. Okay. Our next question is from Bill McLaughlin, and it is the select board willing to put the third school as a priority before any other municipal building projects? The children of Westwood should be a priority.
So we can't speak for the select board. I agree, Bill. I do think that this third school should be a priority for the town. And I think at the end of the day, it comes down to the town and what is the town willing to fund. There may be competing projects. I don't know. I don't know what's coming up for the town. All I know is that we have this MSBA project and we have a third school that we're starting a preliminary design study for. And at the end of the day, it all comes down to what Westwood wants to fund. I will say, on the idea of funding, that if the MSBA project doesn't get funded, if this first one, then the issue of Sheehan is moot, right? Because we just have a whole host of problems we have to deal with. So for us, the first step is funding the MSBA project and also looking at the design of Sheehan. And then, we're just going to have to move forward from there and see what the town is willing to support.
So as of now, we have no more write-in questions. I just wanted to remind, there is one caller. If you do have a question as a caller, you can press *9 and I can unmute you at that time. But right now we have no additional questions.
Hi, this is Tony. I've got a few questions, I think somewhat on social media that I think might be important to address. And the question was around how final, we've gone through this process. We have the tree, we have the field, we have a layout, but how final are some of these things, particularly as it relates to the site?
So as I said, we're 15% into this design. And I think that's particularly true for the site and sort of where the fields are laid out and how the driveways are constructed. And as we go further into schematic design, as we get into schematic design, that's when we're going to really start diving into this project. And I'm actually going to ask Don to speak a little bit about this as the architect, but from what I understand, that nothing is set in stone.
That is correct. What we've done, and we've been able to put a lot of detail into this project so far because of the commitment of the building committee, the school department, and the staff and the community. So we have, assuming the tree goes forward, a plan that's pretty well resolved in terms of where spaces are located within the building, how the building is sitting on the site, its north-south orientation, and so forth. So we wouldn't expect to see wholesale changes in the plan, but absolutely we'll get into more detail as it relates to site circulation with buses, cars, pedestrians, outdoor educational opportunities, athletics opportunities, community use of the site. So all of that will get kind of jumbled back up again in this next phase as we get into more detail.
Thanks, Don.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Anything else, Melinda?
No, I
think
don't
that's
see
it.
anybody else.
Okay.
All right. Tony, you want to call it?
Thank you. I think we had, I think there was at the peak, it was 68 people. So thank you for everyone participating. I know it's people's minds are starting to head into warm weather and summer, hopefully restaurants opening, all that great stuff. So but thank you for everyone participating. So I'd like to need a motion to adjourn the meeting.
I'll make a motion.
Do I have a second?
I'll second. Second.
Great. So let me do a roll call. Josefa Jowdy,
Yes.
Carol Lewis,
Yes.
Maya Platkin,
Yes.
Charlie Donahue. You got mute, Charlie. Okay. And Anthony Mullins, yes. All right. Thank you. Have a good evening, everyone.
Thank you,
Great.
everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Westwood.